Take your seats, movie fans. The film's about to start. Welcome to Craft Disservices, the show where we look at the bad films of cinematic history, the movies that critics rejected but audiences embraced. I'm your host, Aaron Coker. I'm also the host of the Just Enough Trope podcast and the Enterprising Individuals podcast on the Just Enough Trope network. You can find out more at justenoughtrope.com. Joining me on the show today is Sam Landman. He's a writer, actor, and a podcaster as well. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. It's awesome.
Thank you for being here. Tell me about your podcast, Aging Poorly.
Yeah, Aging Poorly was started by Bill Steitler, and he was kind enough to bring me in. And he was just like, I want to do a podcast. We were kind of kicking around ideas. Should it be about comics? Should it be about other stuff, geeky stuff we like?
Sure.
And eventually we're like, well, let's don't shoehorn ourselves. Let's be like, let's find things that we liked as kids and then look at them now and see if they hold up.
Yeah.
So each of us brings two things, one that holds up, one that doesn't. That can be, well, we've done book and record sets, we've done movies, we've done cartoons. One of our guests brought on Twinkies and said, that really holds up.
Okay.
So it can be any pop culture stuff. And what we found is our main goal is to say that, in a nutshell, I don't want to pigeonhole it, but nostalgia is kind of bullshit. Like, it makes you feel great.
Right.
But most of it from our childhoods, and I would assume from probably yours, is the kind of stuff it's just disposable.
Yeah.
It's stuff that they were like, it's going to air once. This episode of Super Friends, we don't care if like Superman is saying Batman's lines. It doesn't matter. People are going to see it once. No one will see this and like critique it 30, 40 years later.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. Aging Poorly, that's the whole thing. The whole premise is like nostalgia can feel good, but it's not necessarily good for you.
Looking at some of the old like cartoons that I used to watch when I was a kid a lot,
yeah.
You'd look through and it's like, well, the cartoon only lasted one season of 65 episodes.
Yeah.
Because they just like pumped them out and they just didn't care like who was watching.
Yeah, Hanna-Barbera was notorious for doing like one season, but like 30 episodes, 32 episodes. And generally you find yourself just going, Hong Kong Phooey can be kind of fun sometimes, but it's the same premise over and over. Filmation was really bad because they had cheap animation.
Yeah,
so
right.
Until they really hit it big with like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, everything they did was just it was the same movements. The Star Trek cartoon actually is, as you probably know, is really fun because they brought in like some of the original writers.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Did things they couldn't do otherwise.
Because you didn't have a special effects budget, you just had an ink budget, basically.
Yeah, you were, and with Filmation, you were able to just kind of go, hey, guess what? We can do anything. This alien creature that you couldn't do, we couldn't build because CBS didn't have the budget. Well, it's possible now. Now, that's the exception, but most cartoons, were just like, oh man, they're brutal.
Yeah.
Really hard to watch.
Those He-Man ones are not very good.
No, and it's for kids. It was people who were way older than us now who were like, this will happen here, and we'll in this episode of Thundar we'll have this happen. It's like, no, that's horrible. That's awful.
You'd think the goal would be to take those old things, and if you're going to remake something, the good rule is remake something that deserves to be better.
Yes.
And instead you get like the Masters of the Universe movie, or like the Transformers films now, where it just seems to be the same aesthetic. They'll take it. They'll eat popcorn and just watch it.
Yeah, it's kids. It's Saturday morning when you had a Saturday morning tradition going on. But I think that my theory is that that's why cartoons are great now, is because people grew up with pap and garbage, and they said, you know what, we're going to write this for like our kids or who we would want to entertain if it was us as kids.
Yeah.
So you have stuff that's sort of adult, but also, kind of fun for kids too.
Sure. Do you ever cover anything like that on your show, like Invader Zim or some of the newer cartoons?
We've tried to we don't have a hard and fast rule, but we've tried to go, all right, 10 years is not long enough. Like,
because it's got to age.
It's got to age.
Right.
Does it age poorly? I mean, I think I suggested maybe Freakazoid. That was a fun like Warner Brothers WB cartoon. And even that is almost it's in the 90s, but it's borderline like almost 2000.
Sure.
So it's like, well, do we actually go, well, how far back do we go? Mm-hmm. So I think we did Bill did Debbie Gibson's Electric Youth album. Okay. Sure. And that's far enough back where it's like, far. Yeah, that's pretty far back. But yeah, we haven't done anything that's been too recent because it hasn't aged enough to be like, oh, that's painful. Yeah. Or that's still, I mean, it's easy to say stuff is still great when it's 5-6 years ago.
And a lot of times things aren't great the longer they go. Like you could do The Simpsons or South Park with itself.
Oh, sure. I mean, my God, what is it? Simpsons is on the 28th season or something?
Yeah, they're coming up on 30, yeah.
And it died so long ago. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't know. There's for me, I'm sort of one of those people who I like, it's still the characters, but when, they kill people off or this person marries this person, I'm like, you lost me. I know. Krabappel should not be marrying this person.
Right.
Done with that.
Well, the name of this show is Craft Disservices, and on every episode of the podcast, we look at a film that's poorly rated, generally lower than 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, but one that's usually well-remembered by audiences at large, or in the case of today's film, has possibly been unfairly judged by history. And maybe we'll be the judges of that today.
Oh, no.
Sam, you didn't know when you walked in here today, saying that we were going to watch The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, that this was going to be a transformative experience for me.
Is that right?
Because I had actually never seen the film up to this point. But in researching it, and also just scenting a certain aroma in the air, as I watched it, I found out that it has a lot in common with another film that features an improbably named blue-collar hero, Hudson Hawk, which is one of my favorite movies. At the behest of many of my friends and loved ones. And I really want to do it for the show someday. I got to find somebody brave enough. But both Ford Fairlane and Hudson Hawk share a writer in Daniel Waters.
No,
who worked on the script?
Really?
Yep. He wrote Heathers originally. That's kind of where he got his break. Wrote this, Hudson Hawk, Batman Returns, and the screenplay for Demolition Man as well.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Okay, I let that slip. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, and there was a couple different writers on this film. Writer-actor David Arnott also got a credit on this film. And I say writer-actor, but his only other credit as a writer is Last Action Hero, which we're covering very soon on this show.
Nice.
So those are two big hits for him. He's probably more of an actor than a writer now after Ford Fairlane and Last Action Hero. And I think it makes sense because this movie has a very Shane Blackian vibe, if that's an adjective.
It does. I mean, the same guy directed Die Hard 2.
Exactly,
so it's and not much worth a damn after that or before that. But I like to think Die Hard 2 is a fun sequel. I might put it up against Die Hard 1. Die Hard 1's great, but the second one's pretty fun. So it has that, God, cinematically, and as far as, I don't know who the DP on it was, on Ford Fairlane was, but wow, it looks pretty in places.
Yeah, it does.
And and they let it slide a couple places, a lot of places.
Yeah. It's Renny Harlin, of course.
Yes.
The infamous Renny Harlin that directed it. And I feel like he's doing his best Tony Scott at this point in his in his career.
Yeah.
Because it's got a lot of those kind of smoky sort of rooms. And I mean, because of the protagonist, of course. But
right.
It's got that kind of cool look that Tony Scott always cultivated. That a lot of times, some of his films, that's kind of all they had going for them.
Yeah.
And you can strap in for this because Shane Black himself appeared on the business end of the camera a couple times as an actor, specifically for the CBS show Dark Justice. I don't know if you remember that one, on which another writer of this film was a producer and a writer. Mind explosion.
I do so much research on things for aging poorly. You've blown my mind several times with what you've dug up. I didn't even do that much digging.
So I don't know what was in the water in the late 80s, early 90s as far as screenwriters and stuff goes. And, of course, both films, Hudson Hawk and this, were produced by sentient pile of cocaine, Joel Silver.
That's right.
That we should probably name this podcast after, like Silver's Gold or something like that, because a lot of the movies are going to be produced by Joel Silver.
Oh, that's fantastic.
There's a million reasons, but why did you want to talk about The Adventures of Ford Fairlane?
Well, as you know, I had a different, idea. I was going to do a different film, and I said, no, I'm going to take the road less traveled. And this came on not long ago, as it's apt to do. I can't believe it was actually on something, on a channel that's on cable.
Right.
But somebody dared to show it. And I watched it and said, there are horrible things about this film that either date it or, let's just say, through the evolution of our sensibilities and how we think now and just how things are, that really play badly. In a way, like Andrew Dice Clay stand-up routine.
Yeah.
Or anything of that matter. For that matter, like there's some Eddie Murphy, Delirious and Raw. There are things in that are pretty offensive.
Yeah.
But what I found in this film, there were things that I was like, no, okay, quick side note.
Sure.
We just did Altman's MASH.
Okay.
Bill is a huge MASH fan, TV show fan. And he brought this to the table and said it doesn't hold up because it's so misogynistic and it sort of outbalances the good.
Yeah.
I disagreed a little bit. I think there were things you could save, but I totally understand this. Has a lot of that. Has a lot because it's Dice.
Sally Kellerman kind of takes it in that film.
She does.
In this, barely anybody. I mean, you got Lauren Holly, who is capable but put upon, and that's about it. Every other woman is just a woman-shaped blob of desire who just throws themselves at dice. Themselves at dice.
Yes, they're all objects, and they're just laser guided at the rock and roll detective,
right?
Ford Fairlane.
If I had to defend it, and we can get into the meat of that later, is that at least the movie, I think it doesn't go far enough into satire. It knows that it's crazy because it's got the setup of like, you son of a bitch, call me, and it's like, all right, you're doing a thing. I kind of see.
And there's one particular scene that is so over the top. It's a sorority scene. Yeah. It's so over the top that I'm like, they had to be aware. And yet, and again, we can talk about this later, one of the problems that sinks this is the same thing that sort of sinks Andrew Dice Clay's entire stand-up routine persona character, if you will, is the fact that the bros and the Goombas and the white straight males at that time were looking at it as like,
right.
Yeah, hot chicks, and it's a sorority, they're doing aerobics and eating corn dogs, and it's like, and even Dice is like, this is like too much like sensory overload for me. I still think that's fundamentally the biggest thing about this film, is that there were people who, even though Dice has said many times it's a character, that's a great excuse. It's really easy to just chalk it up to that and use that as like my shield. Like I'm not going to say like this was me.
Yeah.
This was a character doing XYZ. If you're on stage, fine. If you're doing stand-up, people are going to confuse it immediately.
Yeah.
Unless you're Andy Kaufman or whoever. So it's kind of tough to be like, you can't fool the lowest common denominator. They're just going to buy into whatever.
Right.
They're going to eat the Big Mac and drink the Coors, and no offense to Coors or Big Mac fans who listen to this show, of which I'm sure there are millions. But that's the problem, is like, I think it gets into that territory and they buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. Stupid people aren't going to get satire.
They're not.
Even if that's what he's doing.
Right. Even if he's...
It depends on your audience, too.
It does, and he knew his audience like 100% at this point.
Yeah.
Like, he sold out Madison Square Garden 2 nights in a row, which
First
no
ever to do
comedian
that.
had ever done.
Right.
And that in and of itself speaks to the voracious appetite of these dolts back then who just wanted him to do the dirty nursery rhymes, and wanted the future Howard Stern fans who were like, Howard and Dice, they like think like me, they have the same sense of humor as me, they're saying what I want to say but don't have a stage for.
Yeah. And the weird and sad thing is that they're just entertainers who have an act.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't tell you what Howard Stern's like actual politics are as a person, mostly because he's worn his persona almost his entire life, definitely his professional career.
Yeah.
But it certainly probably doesn't line up exactly with the typical Howard Baba Booey Howard Stern fan.
Right. Not at all. And I think that's, I don't know, that's a double-edged sword here, because as much as I find some good stuff about this film that I still enjoy as, I don't know, maybe one of those guys, maybe one of those bros, it still makes me kind of shiver when, there are certain moments that have nothing to do with his horrible I Ain't Got You scene in the studio where he's singing and the band just jumps in. That's a shivering altogether different versus like, this is so horribly over the top misogynistic. I don't know. There's a back and forth for me that this character, if you will, the Ford Fairlane character, who's really close to Dice, is one of those guys who I feel there is some frailty there that they show in the script versus I can win and I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof and cool as ice and a badass and every woman wants to have sex with me. I mean, even the Hollywood studio system in 1990 was going to make you look, you need to change this. This needs to change this way. There needs to be a 3-act structure maybe, and there kind of is.
Yeah, kind of.
But not
sort
much.
of, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you were a fan of his like growing up or of his old stuff, but I was I don't think I ever was, mostly because I didn't have cable, so there's no way for me to access that.
Right.
And I know that, like, what is it, the Diceman Cometh or whatever, like his big special was like the most rented special like of all time.
Yeah.
And I just watched it the other day, kind of in preparation for this, and it's the camera is as in love with the crowd as it is with him. Like, can you believe that a guy would say this? And look at these assholes. They love it. They're just eating it up. Yeah. And there's this undercurrent of that. And this is, of course, at the same time that, like, political correctness is really starting to assert itself and sort of a movement for that, which in a lot of, you could argue helped kill his career for a time.
Sure.
But that subset is there. Like, he's pumping these douchebags up.
Yeah.
And that thing is still kind of there. And you're right. Like, I feel kind of dirty, but at the same time, I watch this and I enjoy it, maybe with those nostalgia glasses, thinking, well, it was a more innocent time. Maybe it was okay to like it and just say that you're not one of those guys.
Yeah.
But if there was a guy like this now, even comedians like Anthony Jeselnik has a real confrontational kind of act that he gets in trouble for. And I don't think that he believes most of the stuff that he says, but it gets him response. It gets, any press is good press, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's his character.
And I wasn't a huge, I think, my first comedy boner was for like Steve Martin. I had the Wild and Crazy Guy album.
Right.
And I wore that album out and everything he did was gold to me. And then as comedy does what it does, it evolves and changes. I think at that time I was probably, like a lot of people, a big Stephen Wright fan. Mm-hmm. I loved Sam Kinison, who was like one rung below, not offensive, but like just scraping the surface of offensive, but not quite. He had this totally scream gimmick, so that was fun. Yeah. I was never a huge Andrew Dice Clay fan. I think maybe a friend of mine had probably had the Diceman Cometh, and I had listened to it in the same way that I never owned Eddie Murphy Delirious, but saw Raw in the theater. So there were all these things where I loved it. I wasn't so in love. I think the evolution of it seemed too much. It was just too over the top, maybe.
Sure.
And I loved, you have the Steve Martin who is really playing up there, like he's on stage but doesn't believe in punchlines,
right?
And he's evolving comedy. And people like Stephen Wright, who there's a punchline but you're not really sure if you get it, and it might be a way homer where you get it on the way home,
right?
But it's very downplayed. So I like stuff like that. With the Ford Fairlane, I was an only child of a widowed mother, so I'm the biggest sort of introvert and also very sort of mama's boy, and the whole machismo thing was too much for me. It still is.
Talk about toxic masculinity. This is like septic.
Septic
it really masculinity.
Is. That is, I've seen more, you could look up toxic masculinity right now and there'd be so many, you didn't have cisgender, you didn't have toxic masculinity. You didn't have words to explain this.
Right.
Because back then it was sadly just accepted.
Yeah.
And not accepted. I mean, there weren't. It's not like there weren't people who were. I mean, obviously, you look at Nora Dunn's last episode of SNL. She walked off.
Yeah, he was hosting.
Yeah. So she cared enough about the right to say this is wrong.
Right.
To just not appear in her final episode.
Yeah.
And to me, that took balls, man. That is one of those things where you go, okay, yeah, clearly there are people who hate this, but she stood up and did something about it. So I get that. I mean, I get that it's completely toxic. I was just looking over the titles of some of his tracks on his albums, like The Day the Laughter Died,
Okay.
which is him just riffing and there's no actual act. It's just him barely doing anything and just riffing.
Great.
And some of them are just like, you could have a Gwar style band that's borderline offensive or disgusting, but not ever going that far, and name it one of the tracks off that album.
Okay.
It's rough. Like the titles alone just would get people incensed today. And I get it. I mean, I totally get that. This film, however, in terms of a character, I love the sort of hard-boiled, idea of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite reach that.
Yeah, it doesn't get all the way there.
It's no Double Indemnity, but it's for the 90s, but it's got there's something about it at its core that I'm seeing, and I'm seeing glimpses of it, maybe through, these macho pig things that are being said.
Yeah.
But
I almost think that it almost redeems the character, except for the fact that the movie totally failed. But a lot of those comedians you mentioned there's an introspection and a self denigration to them, like a vulnerability that doesn't exist by design in the character, in the Diceman character.
Right.
And yet and he's just a guy on stage, going hickory dickory dock. You put him in a film and he's literally a character with other characters in a movie. So as a movie character that exists what do you think, this is real life? Like exists in a fantasy.
Yeah.
They allow him a little vulnerability and all this shit blows up and, his jokes don't always work. And suddenly it's like, oh, he's a little more endearing than he just is on stage doing nursery rhymes.
And you have to make him that, because otherwise
it doesn't work at all.
It doesn't work at all. It, like you said, it barely works in places, but it really he has to be made real. He's not some two-dimensional on stage, like you said, hickory dickory dock guy.
Right.
So I think it accomplishes that. Although I don't want to say it helps with the cast he has, but they have to be able to be like, well, who are the other people in this universe? Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of helps. You've got, let's face it, Morris Day's in it. So
yes,
you can't fail. If you've got Morris Day in a film, you just can't. Look at Purple Rain.
Fail to succeed, and yeah. There's even a little skit at the beginning of Dice Man Cometh where it acts out this little thing where he plays this character.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he'd always had it in mind that there would be a theatricality to it. I don't know anything about his relation to his persona and his act, but it almost seems like back then he was even planting the seeds of, this isn't me. This is this guy, Dice. And he's going to leave Julie Warner and he's going to go to Hollywood and say goodbye to his mama. And so now he's this.
Well, and he had an appearance on Arsenio Hall, which is
right.
That's the one where he stands up and kind of breaks down. And I've yet to figure out, it's like a Kaufman bit. I've yet to figure out what's real, like where the wrestler's in on it and blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he does this thing where other comedians will say, I know Andrew Clay. And I know when he's vulnerable, and I know when he's not playing that character. And when he kind of breaks down a little bit, it kind of solidifies the idea that the thing that he says on Larry King interviews and all these other people he talks to, look, it's a character. Mm-hmm. I knew guys like this growing up. I don't talk like this. I'm hoping to quit smoking, that kind of shit. Sure. Where it's like, I get it. I'm not totally convinced it's not some crutch or a shield. Or a shield with a crutch on it, or
right, a crutch shield,
crutch with a shield on it. But I'm not really sure, like, if he's just using that as a defense mechanism, which is easy to do in entertainment, or he truly is that. So I don't know. I think
column A, column B.
Yeah, it could be both. But I think this is a good way for him, and also, and you probably did the research on this too. But I
try not to. I try not to research.
There were a series of articles written by this guy named Rex Weiner and
Weiner, yeah.
Weiner. I'm afraid to call him Wiener because that's how it's spelled.
It might be.
Let's just call him Rex Weiner,
sure,
because it's Ford Fairlane, and that's the least offensive thing we're going to say in this podcast.
Right.
But he wrote a series of rock and roll detective stories about Ford Fairlane, which is basically this is loosely based on. I don't know how much sign-off he had on the screenplay, or if he was just like, it's
probably
based on
none.
my characters. Probably none.
Yeah.
I think they were just like, hey, this is cool. You wrote this in the New York Times.
And
I don't know.
before, I can't remember the guy's name, but before Joel Silver picked it up, it had been an option for a film for a long time. And the guy that made like Freebie and the Bean was trying to get it made as a film.
Oh my God, Freebie and the Bean.
Before Joel Silver swept in. And
Yeah, and you know, again, not sure if you were going to drop this bomb later, but
drop it now.
There is a 4-issue limited series DC put out, Adventures of Ford Fairlane. It's basically fan fiction.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is sort of based on the Rex Weiner stuff, but it's clearly Diceman, and it came out around the same time. I'm actually going to buy that. I'm going to buy them and just read them because it's comics, man. I read the Dune comics, you know.
Right.
Why would you read those? Right. But Sienkiewicz drew them, so that's why. But like, man, it's a really, like you said, a lot of this little column A, little column B, you're not really sure what it is. But I think it's fleshed out enough to where he, to me, holds the film together, which is not, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do.
No, I mean, coming from nowhere. Like
from nowhere.
He had he was on a couple TV shows. And
he was on 16, he was, not 16, Pretty in Pink.
Oh, Pretty was pretty.
He was keeping Ducky from being inside with.
Right, yeah.
with Andy. But, I mean, even then he's playing sort of he's called the Diceman. He calls him the Diceman. So, I don't know, man. It's tough. There are some bad things, and there are some good things, and I don't know which one outweighs which. Well,
let's get into them. Okay. And before we get started, I say, like I say on every show, that this podcast is not in the pocket of Big Tomato. We don't endorse Rotten Tomatoes. We're just using it as a metric in this case, as whether this film is good or bad. On the subject of Rotten Tomatoes, what do you think about Rotten Tomatoes and review aggregation sites?
I applaud that whole concept because I think it's, well, whereas we just said that you can basically fool the Goombas and the bros of the world.
Right.
I think film lovers need that, and the aggregation of, you know, these votes and these people who are legitimately love film. I think that's important. I mean, it couldn't have happened any sooner. I don't know when Rotten Tomatoes started, but it's a perfect time for that to keep continuing. And every time, you know, that's literally the litmus test for a lot of movies, especially superhero movies these days. I'm like, okay, sure. What does it say on Rotten Tomatoes? Okay, maybe I'll just skip this one.
Sure.
Unless it's somebody a character I've always wanted to see, but you know, again, and on that subject, I want to preface whatever we're going to say right here. I found good things in Suicide Squad.
Okay.
So that from that point on, you can either just say, this episode's bullshit, this guy's full of crap, or go, okay,
sure.
If he liked a little bit of that, what can he find in Ford Fairlane?
Yeah. And it lets you get away from, you know, I live in a fairly large media market, so there's a lot of options, but I did go to college in a small town, and the reviewer there for like the one paper had no idea what he was talking about. And his views didn't fit mine at all, so I almost took it as like, if he says it's bad, I gotta see that. It's clear that he didn't get that, so let's check it out.
Polar opposite of what you should be.
You can get around that when you have a bunch of reviews together.
Right.
Well, it is The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, and it's 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's at a 24 on Metacritic and 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb. It came out on July 11th of 1990 with a budget of $49 million estimated and made about $21 million at the box office. So not a success.
Not great, but I have a theory about that.
Oh,
it's very simple, and this probably has nothing to do with actual numbers, but half the population went to go see it. I guess, you know, that would be men. The other half, mostly women, said, fuck this.
There were a lot of women in that YouTube clip audience that I saw. They were going nuts. There was Aquanet flying everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
Can you summarize the story briefly?
Sure. I'm horrible at this, so I might have to re-record this, Aaron.
Briefly.
Just telling you very briefly. It's not even an elevator pitch. I was going to say, rock and roll detective finds his true heart. Okay. That's not it, though.
I was ready
awful.
To go with that.
That's total crap. But Ford Fairlane is this rock and roll detective. He's done jobs for In Excess and Milli Vanilli.
Right.
A lot of topical humor there.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, he's being paid in things like koala bears from In Excess or bicycle shorts from Milli Vanilli, for instance. And that's his life. He has a secretary named Jazz. played by Lauren Holly. And essentially it's the misadventures of him trying to find love and find more work, neither of which is happening.
Yeah.
Suddenly he gets multiple offers to find this girl named Zuzu Petals. One is from a shock jock that he was a really good friend with called Johnny Crunch, who almost immediately ends up being murdered. And then another is, oh my God, I forget her name. It's Presley. It's Priscilla Presley's character. That's horrible. I don't even remember her name.
I don't either.
She also says, oh, this is I think at one point, this is my sister or my daughter or something.
Right.
And it's the same person. And he's like, look, Johnny Crunch just died. So it's an interesting sort. There are a few little MacGuffins in there, like your typical hard-boiled detective story, film noir thing. The main guy is played by Wayne Newton,
right?
Julian Grendel of Grendel Records.
Which is a great name.
No, it's so great. And he's basically one of those guys who's trying to put the kibosh on anything that Ford is doing. Beyond that, it starts with the death of a lead singer from a band called Black Plague. So then you get the idea of like, oh, this is okay, cool. This is what the rock and roll detective does. And he eventually finds Zuzu Petals at, I think, what's his name? Bobby Black's funeral from Black Plague. And then there are these discs that
these CDs, these newfangled
technology CDs, that you find out is that they actually have data on them. Zuzu has one, Priscilla Presley has one, and and there's also what seems to be a MacGuffin about a guy named Art Mooney that he finds out around Johnny Crunch's radio show. He's also being sort of hounded by Ed O'Neill from Married with Children, who plays a lieutenant for the and he used to be in a band called Disco Express, with a song called Booty Time, various characters like Morris Day is in there. There are all these sort of divergent storylines that sort of converge at certain points and sort of don't, but. Yeah, you find out that essentially he's trying to make his way in this crazy world. Also, there's a kid involved, which looks like to me was just sort of a last ditch attempt to make this wholesome.
Yeah, or relatable.
Relatable. It's like, well, you got to have some
because he's gonna.
You got to have like it's Barton Fink all over again. It's like you got to have some sort of some man child who has lost his way, or a waif. A man child or a waif. So this is the waif, and I guess Ford Fairlane's the man child. That's not a great breakdown. That's essentially what it is. That's what you could obviously add something, because I'm sure there's something I'm missing.
That is, if you were to make a collage of sorts
from my scrapbook,
from a scrapbook or cut out of magazines. I think that pretty much covers it. It's I love your comment about Barton Fink. I never even thought about that before. It's perfect. It was directed by Renny Harlin, who we spoke about previously, who has more or less been in movie jail since Cutthroat Island in 1995.
That's right, Cutthroat Island, yes.
Which pretty much sank Carolco. And the funny thing is that right after that, Shane Black came back again, and Long Kiss Goodnight came out the next year, directed by him, which also wasn't really like a success, but has become kind of a cult hit over the years. And it's not a bad film.
No.
He's a 5-time Razzie Award nominated director, although he's never won, which at some point, if you've been nominated 5 times and you haven't won, you've kind of won, haven't you? That's kind of worse than not actually winning. So. And I think it's kind of unfair. Like you mentioned before that Die Hard 2 is pretty good. I think Cliffhanger was in 96. And that's a fun, kind of pulpy film.
Yeah.
I think I saw that a couple times in the theater. But he's not doing much now. I think he did a Jackie Chan, Johnny Knoxville movie recently. So,
oh, wow.
Not great.
Yikes.
Not looking too good for him.
Oh, poor Renny.
As you mentioned before, Wayne Newton is in this for some reason. I always kind of like it when he crawls out and does a movie role for some reason. Was he in, was it Vegas Vacation?
He was.
I think he shows up. And so he's in this. Priscilla Presley's in this for like 10 seconds. And I think she's kind of underserved. I mean, literally, you talk about like where are the women in this film? Yeah. She shows up in a fun put in quotes-ish scene where she kind of confronts him and kind of holds her own. He's trying to make jokes, and he's like, it's a joke. She's like, oh, I don't have a sense of humor either. I thought that was a good line.
I was married to Elvis Presley. I don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Nothing was funny around him.
And then, of course, shows up, gets killed in like her second scene, like near the end of the film.
Which is sad because it's like, she was an interesting character.
Yeah, we could have done more with that.
Could have.
Gilbert Gottfried gets killed off almost immediately, like you said. And it's funny to see him so young, first of all. But I really like Gilbert Gottfried. I know that he is very polarizing, and one pole is way bigger than the other.
It is,
and so I'm not sure how much this movie could have sustained more of an appearance by him.
No, it's a great appearance.
But it's a great short appearance.
I think it's good for him because he's the stuff he's given. He's only playing the Gilbert Gottfried character. Again, here we're talking about characters,
right?
Even though it's him, it's kind of hard to embrace that, but it's true. He's the shock jock, and when he's on the air, he sounds like Gilbert Gottfried. Yeah. When he's just Johnny Crunch talking, what is it? You Suzuki Samurai, Bensonhurst piece of shit. Yeah. When he's just Johnny Crunch talking about his daughter, Zuzu Petals, there is a softness and a sadness and a like, oh man, like, he says some horrible shit about like her mother, and then they rag on each other just like guys do. Right. But there's a wonderful sensibility about him.
It doesn't change that they're still extremely like chauvinistic and all that stuff. But suddenly it's like, oh, these two are like actually real human beings in this scene. Yeah,
because they were in a band called FF and Captain John or some shit like that.
I think it's because it's like he's Johnny Crunch, but he's like Captain Crunch.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I don't
know.
know.
You see like a headshot of them because they used to be in a band together in the 70s or whatever. But I mean, God, there are moments where I'm like, I wouldn't mind seeing some Johnny Crunch fan fiction. Why not? Not slash fiction, certainly, but fan fiction.
Sure, yeah, in a prequel or something.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that moment's over, then it's, you're spam. No, you're spam. It's like he has this like weird playground sort of insult relationship with Ed O'Neill's character where it's not even good lines. It's not like they're really nailing each other.
No.
They're just taunting each other.
Childish.
Yeah, you're a jerk off. You're a jerk off. Let's call the whole thing off.
No, because that's what I see, and that's what I call you. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Whatever. What is it? Rubber and glue. It's like it's bounces off me, sticks to you.
Right. God. That's something that I thought was interesting about the screenplay is that I feel like that was a choice. Yeah. Although it's hard to tell because a lot of his stand-up bits are people screaming and yelling dice. Yep. And then him doing he's got a very low joke work rate. And I'm not criticizing his act, but he just does hickory dickory dock. People go crazy. He goes, smokes over the side of his head. Yeah. And then keeps going. Right. And you think, okay, so a screenwriter could write him some more bits, take his bits that don't really work or are a little offensive and kind of streamline them. Yeah. But this is a specific scene where they must have decided these two either hate each other or love each other so much that they can't even like put their best material out there. They're just like they're just getting in each other's face. And
I wonder about that because I saw an interview with him on Larry King. Yeah, and he talks about like a bunch of guys wrote the screenplay based on the Rex Weiner thing and the character, and then I punched up the script. Now, by punch up the script, it's throw in because it's almost all voiceover. Yeah. And he has a few of those dice jokes that are clearly dice jokes he threw in. But the attitudes or him going, you can almost feel him going, Ford Fairlane wouldn't say that, a.k.a. Dice wouldn't say that. Sure. So I think him coming in and going, maybe this needs punched up in places is great. And yet there are those moments where you're like, God, this could have been a great sort of riff fest between these two guys. Yeah. It's just not.
Or he's like, hey, you're a poet and you don't know it. Hey. It's like, that got through? That got through 3 screenwriters? Wow. Robert Englund is in this for some reason.
That's right.
Actually, I'll tell you what the specific reason is. Billy Idol was originally cast to play Smiley.
What?
The hitman, yes.
Oh, God.
And got in a massive motorcycle accident like right before filming started. And so they just reached out and got Robert Englund. Of course, all the cross-promotional stuff is still there with Cradle of Love, which appears in the movie, but appears in like a million movies. Right. And the original version of the video, and you'll never find this anywhere, had scenes from Ford Fairlane on the TV, in addition to him being on the painting or whatever. That's a weird video.
That's a weird video.
And it goes, sometimes I want to hear the song, but you have to go through the entire little vignette of like the guys working at the computer, and then
he's
like, just play the song.
Yeah. Oh, she's coming into his apartment and she's stripping, but not stripping enough to where like, it would be interesting.
Right.
It's just, weird.
Yeah. She's going from schoolgirl down to what you'd wear to the club. So, she's in a bustier. Crazy.
She's just changing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. She's just changing to go out.
I need to use your apartment for changing.
Right. There are a lot of cameos in this. We've mentioned some of them already. Also, David Patrick Kelly is in this, who, of course, was in Twin Peaks, and he's the Warriors come out to play guy. Yeah. And some other musical stars. Sheila E. is in this. Tone Loc is in it.
He is.
And when I saw his name in the credits, I thought, rapper-actor. Maybe he'll have a part in this. Nah. I don't know what the situation was, but he just appears in the beginning for Dice to show how magnanimous he is. I love rap and the new stuff. It's great. Guy's gone. No more black people in the movie except for Morris Day.
And then they throw what's his name from Twin Peaks out the window, and they beat the crap out of him for destroying their PA or whatever.
Yeah.
There's an interesting thing about Morris Day being in this. I read way too many rock bios and autobiographies. One of which was way before Prince died, was a book called Let's Go Crazy, The Making of Purple Rain.
Okay.
And it's the entire process from Prince having an idea to the studio getting interested, once he had more and more albums that were doing really well.
Yeah.
One of the little sections in this was the fact that Morris Day, after Purple Rain, some Hollywood producer was like, look, we need to get you some vehicles because you're clearly the underrated star of Purple Rain. We need to put you in these particular movies.
Sure.
This might have been the first, possibly last, besides Graffiti Bridge, that he appeared in. This could have been a potentially like, this could jumpstart his career as an actor. Not saying he was like fantastic or anything; he wasn't horrible, but that book was really interesting to say like, somebody saw him, maybe an agent or something, a producer or whatever, and just said, you know what, I think we could put you in. You've got a fun character face, and we could put you in stuff.
More has been done with less.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's.
I mean, he's
so
very
true.
entertaining in Graffiti Bridge.
He is
in Purple Rain and in this too.
Yeah. But no future for Morris Day.
No, I guess not.
Not in Hollywood.
It'd be interesting to see how Billy Idol handled the transition as well.
Oh, my God.
If he had ended up playing that role. Because, Robert Englund. You can drop him into anything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they probably changed the part a little bit to fit his sensibility. But, he's in this movie and you're like, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, you would need a weird guy. Hello, this weird guy to come in and be unkillable and try to kill him. And it just works. Yeah.
Totally.
And there's a koala in this movie.
Yeah, and there's a koala. It's not even, hey, let's get a koala trainer to bring a real koala in. It's a puppet.
Yeah. Well, koalas are mean, supposedly. So.
Oh, is that right?
Well, I think they're drunk a lot of the time.
Oh.
Because the leaves they eat, the eucalyptus, they eat them, and the sun ferments the sugars in them, and so basically they're just like drunk and sort of surly.
Wow, I did not know that. Well, I'm learning something.
They're surly bears.
Here. On Crafted Surfaces. I can't believe I'm learning about koala bears.
There are 5 puppeteers listed in the credits.
I didn't even look that up.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So apparently it took 5 puppeteers to bring this koala to life. And for me, maybe just moving into the highlights or what we really like about the film, the koala bear is sort of the dividing line for me. Never having seen this before, and I'm glad I didn't see this as a kid because I don't know what would have happened to me. But
right.
With my adult brain and sensibilities, like 10 minutes in, I'm thinking, I'm 10 minutes away from the worst movie I've ever seen. And then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh man, I'm hooked into this. Yeah. And then the koala shows up. And it's like, okay, where are we going? And then they hang the koala. And it was like, that should replace shoot the dog. Like, hang the koala should be the new thing for how bad like a bad guy is or what the stakes are in a film.
On a fan,
you're right. The classic.
Although clearly... if it was Silver's hand or whoever said, it's great that you killed the koala, but you should throw a bit in at the very end.
Right.
and Diceman goes, what do you think, we actually kill a koala?
Yeah, totally through the fourth wall.
Totally.
You kill the fourth wall, but not a koala. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I put that as one of those, kind of one of the things I like about this stupid flick is the fact that, wow, it's polarizing. That moment when it happens and he walks in and you're like, oh shit, everything's gone to shit.
Right
now.
Yeah, right. And then it just keeps going because his house blows up and he's like, all right, well, let's go. And his car blows up and they just take everything from him.
Yeah.
That and just the whole thing has this sort of weird, nowadays, like comedy, improv rules comedy.
Yeah.
And so you can take the weirdest, stupidest thing and just run with it. And especially on something like a podcast, just that additive kind of aesthetic to humor makes things funny. And there are bits like that where, okay, so we bring this kid in, who knows who wrote the kid into the script, but he's missing his father, and he'll know him when he sees the ring, and it's a Fred Flintstone ring, and then just into the soundtrack for no reason. Just to like hit it one more time.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense, but that's this movie. Like it's a koala hanging good time.
Yeah, and there are moments, the band Yellow, who does the song "Oh Yeah," which is Duff Band's signature move. They did the soundtrack to this, which I thought was interesting. And some of the because they use samplers and that kind of shit, there's a moment, I think, I can't remember which part, maybe it's when they're on the Capitol building, but there are moments where there are sound effects that sound like they should be part of the movie, but they're actually part of the song, like some weird cartoon noise from Hanna-Barbera. I mean, not saying it's connected to the Fred Flintstone, it just made me think of it. It's this weird, like, why are you including this type of weird,
right.
Oh, you included like a record scratch thing in the middle of this song? Or is this happening in the scene?
Right.
It's kind of tough because their stuff usually lands pretty well in the movie, and then every once in a while you'll go, why is this a Fred Flintstone-like thing? Why is this little squeak happening?
Yeah.
It's really strange. Like,
I think the looser the movie gets, the better it is.
I think so too.
When it's just when it's all the plates are about to fall down is like when it really comes through. And even in stuff like the voiceover, like there's a part where he's like, "You see what I'm saying to you is what I'm saying, and you know what I'm saying? I don't know what I'm saying." It's just like, all right, next scene, keep moving.
Well, and there's one scene that I don't think I ever noticed, and I've seen this film way too many times, but there's a scene right before Johnny Crunch, I think, dies, where it's been voiceover.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We've already gotten that from the very first scene in the first, 2 minutes. And then he's sitting in his car, and he's talking, doing a monologue, as if it's a voiceover, but we're clearly looking at him. It's just like an isolated shot of him from the side, and he's saying the same kind of stuff he would during a voiceover. And you're like, what? Wait,
right.
What? I mean, I guess there don't have to be rules, but you can't have him just talking to him. He's already talking to himself in the voiceover.
Right.
Like, just track that. It doesn't take much to track it. But I'm like, there are moments where it just kind of falls apart, and you go, all right, they didn't care. Or
there's a part. It's when he's driving away from K-Dirt or whatever.
That's right, K-Dirt. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he hits his VO from the back of his head, and it turns around. We're looking at him from the front, and he's just giving his line.
He's just talking.
And there's a part before that when he leaves Crunch's office, and he's saying something about another day, another dollar, and then he's like, like he just didn't want to say the rest of it.
Okay, I know specifically what you're talking about. That is one of my favorite parts because if you look, who's going to zoom in? Who's going to own the Blu-ray of this and have it on a high definition TV? But maybe someday. But when he's skipping across the street,
right? Yeah,
and he goes, money, 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 money.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right.
That's one of my favorite moments because it just shows how incredibly childish and stupid he is. And you can't, even if you, again, Blu-ray, high-def TV, you can, even on my shitty TV, I can tell that's 80 yard, and his lips aren't moving. As he turns to get into the car, he's not saying any of that.
Okay, yeah,
so
sure.
It was just him going, I'm skipping across, and I think we should put something in here. Like, all right, well, Dice, say something. All right, money, money, money. And
right.
that was the best take, so why not? That's done.
He wanted to do a bit on the Beverly Hillbillies, but they couldn't clear it, so he just There's a part where, like you said, at Johnny Black's funeral, where he gets attacked again by Smiley or Smiler or whatever, and they're chasing each other with hearses like through this cemetery.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm looking for. Like, it's ridiculous, and they keep going in a straight line for so long.
Yes.
Like, how this is a runway, right? Or is it like a cemetery? And then, like, Robert Englund keeps calling him, like, on the phone, like, to taunt him, like, while they're driving.
How do you know the number?
Or
is there just, like, is it, like, it's like 911, except it's for hearses? It's like 711.
Maybe it's on the side of the car or something.
Maybe it is, you know.
And then his assistant calls him, and he thinks it's him. And then they finish, hangs up. And then he calls him again. He's like, what was that? Oh, no, let's get back to this. Okay, so you're taunting me. Yeah.
Yes, and that's also got my favorite cameo in it, that scene. The woman who's not dead.
Right, who's in the gurney in the back, yeah.
She is the actress from Young MC's Bust a Move video.
Okay.
She's also in, I want to say, the very beginning of Jane's Addiction's Stop video, where it's got a little spotlight on her face.
Okay.
But, like, she's the one where, like, I was obsessed. I would watch Young MC's Bust a Move video just for her dancing and saying, or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Clearly she wasn't the singer, but she was the one they brought in.
Yeah.
But I'm like, where is she now? Well, guess what? She's not dead, but she is the corpse in the thing. I don't know. I should look up. I should look her up. I'm going to get divorced.
Look her up. See what's up.
I'm going to get divorced.
Yeah, right.
I filed for divorce right now because this woman probably still exists. I don't know, in the valley. I don't know where she lives now, but I'm going to track her down. I'm going to see what she's up to. I really want to know.
Exactly.
I'm going to bust a move.
Oh, man. Do you think that audiences rejected this. They rejected Harrison. They didn't reject anything Harrison Ford did in the 80s. Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
I was thinking of another movie this kind of reminds me of is Leonard Six.
Ooh.
With this just totally wacky, it's a heightened reality, sort of fourth wall breaking thing. Where people just, after like Lethal Weapon, people just weren't looking for that, maybe. Like they wanted their commando, they wanted Hollywood to take itself seriously, and they weren't looking for like a Looney Tunes type thing.
I think that's part of it.
Which is so weird because a lot of that Looney Tunes sensibility is baked into things like Lethal Weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Because Riggs is just he quotes Bugs Bunny.
Absolutely. He's a cartoon character.
Yeah.
I mean, you need that. You need that in that film. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit of that. I think it's mostly just the fact that dude was on a roll. Dice was killing it.
Yeah.
But in a very, very tough direction. A very hard to stomach direction. I think people immediately saw, oh wait, he's a lead in a movie. Pass. I think no one would give this a chance besides the diehards who love Diceman.
It's one thing when you go into a club and you expect to see something crazy.
Right.
You got it's a 2-drink minimum.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing in like a movie theater.
It is. And I think there are people who there are the Nora Dunns of the world.
Okay.
Which I do not blame her in the slightest.
I think Sinead O'Connor walked out of that one too.
Did she really?
Yeah.
I mean, I totally, man, that makes perfect sense. I think there are those people in the world who are like, you know what? I know what I'm going to get out of a Diceman, Andrew Dice Clay movie. Not going to give him my money, which makes, again, perfect sense. I think there's something to that. I just think, and part of what you're saying, I think, is also true. I think they want the actual action heroes.
Yeah.
I don't need the Looney Tunes. And if I'm getting it, I'm thinking there's probably going to be a guy. Let's just call him Jim Carrey in a few years, and he might actually do something that I'll care about in a wacky, fun way.
Right.
But if I could predict the future, I would probably call the future Jim Carrey versus like,
right.
Andrew Dice Clay.
Yeah, I mean, the present, in so far as the late 80s, belongs to Die Hard, where he's like, he's screaming, and when he's fighting guys, his feet are bleeding and stuff like that.
Right,
and,
right.
We don't want, like, the guy with the gambler's rig that, like, shoots the gun out when it comes out, which is one of my favorite bits.
It is my favorite bit, too. But I don't think people were ready. I think that they needed something new.
Yeah.
And, again, I think the beginning of every decade is always, we're getting some chemtrails off of the last decade a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
So we're not really sure in terms of fashion, music, movies, pop culture in general. Like, it's all experimental. Like, let's go all in and try something new. I don't think this was totally new, but I don't think people were ready for it.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of literally the last film of the 80s, or the last major release of the 80s, Tango and Cash, which came out like December 25th or something, 1989, which was Russell, Stallone, and then features Michael J. Pollard builds them a super truck that they, that they drive around, and the guy's got a gun that shoots out of his boot or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
That was definitely creeping in, and audiences were like, no, thank you. We're good. No. We don't want that for now.
Yeah, we're okay without that.
Well, I mean, we've covered good and bad in this film.
So much.
There's a couple things, unanswered questions that I had. Like, and I don't know if it's from cuts or what, but there's these two henchmen that are trying to kill him. They throw Lauren Holly out of a window.
Yes.
And she's fine. I mean, she's hurt, but...
It's two stories.
It's the kind of thing where if you cut away, you think dead, and then she comes limping up later.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the film, she ends up fighting one of them in the alley. Then Sam, the pervert, shows up, and they're both going to take this guy on. We never see how that resolves. They just show up in the club later... And I don't think they've beat him up or like finished him on screen.
Oh yeah,
it's like what happened to that guy?
Yeah, because there were two of them, and at one point, like, yeah, because they're Wayne Newton's henchmen, and I think at one point he asked, or Dice asked, or Ford asked, like, "What are you? Some group?" And he goes, "Yeah, we're called Pain or whatever."
Yeah, right.
Oh, nice name. And they kind of do some damage, and then just one. Like
I think
you said,
he electrocutes one with the gum in the on the earring trick or whatever in the socket. Yeah. And then the other one, Lauren Holly hits with her car.
Right.
And she's like, well, you threw me out a window, hit the car, we're probably even, right?
And then he punches her, which is like, yikes.
Yeah, right. She takes a hit.
Yikes. Yeah.
There's your equality right there.
Oh, man.
And then also at the end, there's a lot of, it's kind of screenwritery, but sometimes you like a good payoff. You know, we get the payoff of the milkshake bit, the Sambuca milkshake.
Yep.
Where 100 witnesses watch him burn Wayne Newton to death. And then he's like, I can't remember the line, but it's like, oh, guess that's a thing to do. And then he walks off the stage, and he's just, are we going to put him out? Like, his guy's just burning.
He's just on fire.
Good job. Good job. You did it, Ford Fairlane.
Well, and the worst part of... not the worst, but there are so many other worse parts, but the new hitmaker / whatever flavor of the month, Kyle Troy,
yeah,
who is sort of I don't know, before a pre-Rick Astley, but almost a Boy Georgian type of character.
Yeah, Flock of Seagulls-y kind of guy.
That Wayne Newton, that Grendel is trying to make the next big thing. You know, the way they get back at Grendel is they have a microphone, and he talks about how the record industry sucks, and this new Kyle Troy. Again, there's one moment where it does this very Hollywood thing where, like, he's talking about Kyle Troy, talking about how he's a wimp and he sucks and he can't sing, he's no talent, and this little shot of, like, there's a quick pan up of his eyes, and Kyle Troy's crying in front of people, and of course everybody's like, boo. You know, it's those things you go, you know, if you're... I guess I didn't expect any reality, like real life shit to be in this movie.
Right.
But it really never happens here. It's completely, okay, everybody, I need everybody in the crowd to be like, boo. Just boo him because we're hearing Wayne Newton Grendel talk about how he hates all of you.
Right.
We just need to get a quick whip pan of you guys booing, and then that's all. And it just... Those are the moments. It's the ain't got you moments. It's that moment where I'm like, okay.
Well, you're looking for reality in a movie where Andrew Dice Clay walks into a recording studio and goes, "Step aside, Junior." And then there's like a spotlight, and suddenly he's like inside a studio. He's on stage. He does a whole number.
Yeah.
Did he have? Did he record like an album, or did he have any?
He's on
ambition to sing.
No, that song's on the soundtrack.
Okay.
But there are many songs in the soundtrack that I wouldn't recommend. So that's probably, besides Cradle of Love, and hate to bring it up, but Richie Sambora does a version of When Cries Mary.
Yeah, right.
In the movie you only hear like 10 to 15 seconds, but trust me, that's enough. You don't need a Richie Sambora like Hendrix moment. You just don't need that.
I mean, they spent $50 million, and there's like the whole subplot with Jimi Hendrix's guitar. Like, you couldn't get the Hendrix one?
Yeah,
it was enough for sale or something.
And they already had Purple Haze in the movie, but not on the soundtrack. Yeah. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I guess I'm asking. I'm asking of this film the same shit that I asked for when I got boots when I first moved to Minnesota. I was like, I want something that is waterproof, completely snowproof, whatever. I don't want to be able to trip or skid. I want them to be like skid proof.
Right.
I want to be able to do this, and also if I want to dance in them. Just when I feel like dancing. And somebody said, you're not going to get all of that out of a boot.
Sure.
You're just not in Minnesota. And I'm like, why not? And that's the same thing I'm asking of the Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Why not? Why can't I get all this? Well, because it's Andrew Clay.
Right.
You can't ask realistic questions
what's
like
the
that.
engineering thing? It's like you can do it cheap, quickly, or efficiently or correctly or something like that.
Yeah,
You
that's
pick
right.
One of those. Or maybe the Ford Fairlane version would be, like a girl is either it's crazy, hot, or smart or something like that.
Yes, you can do it. The knob goes from more offensive to less offensive. Right. And there's no middle ground. There's no middle ground.
A lot of times in bad films, I'd like to look at how they open. And I have a theory about how, I like to call it checking the state of the robot holocaust.
Okay.
Which is that if you have a movie that opens with excessive title cards, or a movie that opens with excessive voiceover, or a movie that features voiceover throughout, or if a movie opens over water. And you know that shot I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah,
where
yeah.
you're opening over water, it's a helicopter shot, it pans up to see the city or whatever it is. And
Right.
there are exceptions to all these rules.
Sure.
Because Blade Runner features extensive title cards.
Right.
Actually, the theatrical cut features a lot of voiceover.
That's right.
And I think RoboCop opens over water. So you can get out of it. But if you've got more than one, you're in trouble.
Oh, I can see that. I have one rule about that.
Sure.
This, to your point, just like some of yours, breaks the rule that I already had set in motion. I usually have a thing about, and this is how most movies are structured, so it's not a rule that most people break or most studios break. I don't want to see the lead character in the first 5 minutes.
Oh, interesting.
Or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Because I just think that that's generally what they want to do, some sort of setup about, there are films like Jurassic Park, the same idea. It's like, what's happening? Oh, it's this thing. Well, you don't see the main people.
Sure.
It's a completely different thing in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
The reveal for Indiana Jones is a good example, too.
Yeah. It's a Hamlet thing to go classical on you.
It totally
You
is
don't
a
see him
Hamlet
right
thing.
away,
It's
right.
like, we're setting up the universe.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Hamlet. Oh, hi, Hamlet. So, I think there's something to be said for that rule. This, of course, breaks it. You get voiceover.
Yeah.
It's in front of an ocean. You
Yeah.
see the character is right there in the first 2 seconds.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I hate to say, even though it broke that rule for me, I like how you get right into this thing.
Yeah.
Skip the potatoes, get to the meat. We're in it. We're going forward. He's a rock and roll detective. He gives you quick hits, and you're in.
Yeah, and he's a detective, and I think noir gets a pass because it's like Blade Runner. That's VO. That's noir. That's how you do it.
Right.
Internal monologue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Another great example you mentioned before, Suicide Squad opens over water, and then also maybe I want to add a new leg to this stool. Featuring a popular song, which is way too on the nose for what's going on.
Yeah.
Which Suicide Squad is just
God
90 minutes of.
So painful.
Yeah.
So painful and that's one of my stickler things too. It's like, you know what? You know who did this really well and usually does it pretty well? For all his faults, Tarantino normally will pick some weird, obscure thing.
Yeah.
And that's the new flavor of the month. That's what people are going to start listening to, surf music or whatever with Pulp Fiction or whatever. But man, Suicide Squad, it's so bad. Musical choices are so bad in this. I hate it. But yeah.
It was clearly done in 5 minutes. Like they clearly did not spend any time thinking about it. Yeah, I love the cue in Inglourious Bastards where it's like, what does cat people putting out fire have to do with... except for the fact that we're going to end this with a fire.
Right.
What does that have to do with anything, this World War II theater? I think it's just he loves the song, which is a great song, and wanted to use the cue, and so he did. And he's Tarantino. Nobody's going to question it.
No, and I like that that sort of aesthetic that he has with all of his stuff. It's like, you know what? This could have been better. But damn it, I love all the music that happens in Death Proof.
Okay.
Not a huge fan of the film, but because Robert Rodriguez kills it with Planet Terror. But and besides the fact that it's Kurt Russell being a badass, the music in it is just phenomenal.
Yeah. So with that, the voiceover being forgiven, and we're not really opening over water. It's kind of a Sunset Boulevard-y, starting where we end and then going back to it.
True.
I'm going to give it a pass, and I'll say that we don't have to worry about the robot holocaust. We've got a ways to go before humanity's world falls.
Right.
Why do you think that critics, except for all the reasons that we've already piled upon this, rejected this?
That's a good question. I don't want to fall back on that they just hated Diceman.
Yeah.
But that's got to be part of it. That's got to be most of it.
Yeah.
I think that the deciding voices were just like, we've had enough. And he hadn't been around that long. But it was so much in such a short amount of time with the stand-up and all the specials and all the shit you heard about him.
And he possibly already reached his apex and was on the way down.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you're a fan, but I see just about every Woody Allen film in the theater. Andrew Clay was in Blue Jasmine, and he's great in it. The entire cast is. It's not the perfect movie. It's a decent, not like great, but decent Woody Allen movie. I just think he's really good and is kind of finding that next stage in his career. At that point, I think it was oversaturation.
Yeah.
But I think critics just, oh God, I mean, I usually do a bullet list of things that came out in 1990, and there's so many great films that came out probably in 1990.
Absolutely.
This just, I think they sniffed the blood and were like, this dude isn't going to win. We're done.
Critics will do that.
Yeah.
Here's our segment called Pick of the Patch, where I read the reactions of some critics.
Ooh, okay.
And these are all, I do my best to get contemporary reviews. This isn't any of that.
Okay.
No offense as a internet film reviewer myself, but no look backs. These are all at the time period.
Cool.
So Rita Kempley of the Washington Post says that, quote, "The trouble is, every woman is a bimbo in Ford's eyes, and the thrust of his comedy is purely pelvic. It's impossible to tell whether Clay is lampooning the locker room lout or simply exploiting the current vogue in hate comedy." And I say, what's the difference? Because he's definitely profited off of it, whether he is faking it or not.
And the lowest common denominators, his fans aren't going to know the difference.
Exactly.
They're just not.
Yeah. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star, and like a lot of his reviews, this was kind of didactic. It was sort of like instructive for him. He says, quote, "Is the movie any good? No. Does Andrew Dice Clay have a future in movies? As an actor, yes. He's got a strong screen presence. He's at home and confident. But his persona is going to get very old very fast because it's not likable to begin with, and there's nowhere he can go with it."
Typical Ebert, I completely agree with that. I think there was no place. It's like, this as an actor. It's like, oh, okay, so I start the play just screaming. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, we open in space. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And Owen Gleiberman, my favorite, in one of his very first reviews, I believe, for Entertainment Weekly, gave it a D+ and said, "Clay's hateful leer is reptilian, but there's something magnetic in his absolute fearless conviction that the more he acts like a proudly insensitive blowhard, the more you'll like him."
That explains the plus.
Yes.
I didn't a D+, eh? Okay.
Yes.
Not an
Right.
F- or an F+.
And there are definitely bad things in the review, but I picked that out. That is, the entire review is like that. You read the review. This is one of my problems with aggregation sites, is that you read a review that is a D+ review that is all kind of constructive criticism or could have been, should have been.
Yeah.
And how do you turn that into a number?
Yeah.
Especially when they don't give a letter review, and it's just like, I wish this was better. So what do we got? 1 to 100. What's it going to be?
I wish every movie, even the ones I love the most, were better.
Right. Yeah, me too.
I wish you could get me boots that would get me through the winter. That's what I want every movie
get
to
those
give
winter
me.
Boots. Well, it's funny because this movie actually went on to surprising international success. It turns out in post-communist Hungary, everybody was getting VCRs now that the Iron Curtain was down. And, of course, the piracy game was in full swing. And so a lot of people had this on pirated VHS. And Dice for the film was dubbed over by a Hungarian actor and comedian named Fero Nagy, who apparently made it even dirtier, like inserted like his own sort of dirty jokes. And so this became like really popular. There's a whole, probably a little younger than us, generation of people that came up quoting this line, quoting the movie, quoting lines from the movie.
Oh, man.
It was also successful for a similar reason in Spain due to Dice being dubbed by a local comedian named Pablo Carbonell. And it became a sensation in Norway after its 1992 VHS release, and it was released on DVD in the early 2000s specifically because of the huge demand from the Norwegian market. People demanded to have a DVD copy of Ford Fairlane.
What?
Yeah. So I don't know if Dice does international tours, but he should maybe check it out. Check out Europe.
I am... Damn those Hungarians. I don't understand. I mean,
How do you translate Hickory Dickory Dock? That's what I want to know.
I mean, is that the equivalent of? I mean, it's clearly not the exact, but is that the equivalent of like George Lucas going back and changing some things in the special edition?
Oh,
is he going to change this? Because I mean, that's clearly his thing.
Yeah.
But this is like a step further. Like, okay, we're taking it out of our hands.
Yeah.
And you're dubbing in your own stuff, like your own bits, and making it more offensive. That's amazing to me.
And that had to happen because it's clear that nobody wanted anything to do with this film after it came out. In fact,
Right.
Fox was going to produce Dice Rules, his next concert film, and they dropped it from their schedule and just
Really?
relinquished rights because they wanted nothing to do with him. So when it came time to bring it to Hungary, to bring it to Spain, to bring it to Norway, they clearly just went, do your own thing.
Whatever.
And
we
so
don't care.
the Hungarian version of Andrew Dice Clay stepped in and was like, I can't even make the sound right. I got this.
Well, yeah, because there's not any sort of topical U.S. humor per se.
No,
it's just like
the whole Hollywood experience.
Yeah, I just think there's something. It's actually, man, that's kind of. I almost want to see a transcribed version of what their jokes were.
We'll translate it back, sure.
And are they funnier? And is the character more endearing, or is it clearly, like you said, it's more offensive? But like offensive in what way? Like what's offensive in Hungary?
Yeah,
I mean, are they the same things? Probably not. Do they make fun of? Just newsflash, everybody. I don't know shit about Hungary, but I'm just gonna say, are they just making fun of like that local goat? Or like how the meadows do this funky thing.
I apologize to Hungarian listeners.
Or across the Hungarian tracks, that village over there does this funny walk thing, and we're going to make fun of that. Is it all very topical humor about a specific region?
In Soviet Russia, Clay dices you. Yeah, right. I don't know. Homework for the audience, I think, maybe, because I'm actually getting interested in learning about that now, too.
Hungarians. Bastards, you were just fascinating to me.
It was a weird place after the wall fell. I got to tell you that.
True. Wait, the wall was in Man, I'm learning so much on this podcast. I have no idea.
Curtain wall. It's all the same. Hey!
When the curtain fell. Oh! What?
Well, as we bring this thing to a close, I'd have to ask, would you recommend this film? Is it a flash or is it flush?
Wow. I would recommend it just as an, I'm going to screw up this word, but like it's sort of an anthropomological type of thing. What am I trying to say? I like it in the same way that we looked at MASH on aging poorly in a similar way.
Yeah. He was on MASH, by the way, the original MASH.
Was he?
He appeared on, I think, 1 or 2 episodes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I would say, look at it from a let's not do the same thing in history, and let's not let history repeat itself.
Okay.
If to look at it as sort of an evolved type of thing, I don't know. There's something about looking back at things, and I don't like writing everything off just to say, well, we've evolved as a species, so this pop culture or this art or whatever is beneath us or is something we can't look at and learn something from. I'm not saying you can learn shit from Adventures of Ford Fairlane.
It's the Delirious Dilemma.
It is.
You brought it up at the beginning of the show, which has always been one of my favorite concert films.
Yeah.
And then as the years go on, and I don't think I was ever like an asshole, but like as I get more and more woke, or society does, it's like, all right, that doesn't really work.
Well,
That doesn't really work either.
And you also have to look at, this is a straight white male saying that I enjoy Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Now, if that's not the most unsurprising thing ever, I don't know what is.
Not all film fans.
No, that's true. but I will say, like, I have to look at myself and be like, all right, well, I'm giving this opinion. I'm not, he uses the F word at least once, and I'm not saying the FUCK word in terms of homosexuals.
Yeah.
He also did that in his act.
But it's like unlike his act where it's just, am I right? Am I right?
Yeah.
He kind of, in the movie, he even pulls it back. And I'm not sure if this was him or the screenwriters, but he's like, oh, well, it's just a word. I'm open-minded. I don't got a problem with it. He's my decorator or whatever. I feel like they don't really like double down because his act is like, you got pimps, prostitutes, and so on and so forth. It's like, oh, they're all the same. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dice.
Yeah. I just think there's that weird line of like, I don't know why anybody would watch this film and go, you know what? I want to see where we came from in terms of like,
is there a Ford Fairlane too?
Have we evolved as a society? Well, of course we have.
Yeah.
So I don't expect anybody to actually watch it in that way. I mean, in a way, I would say flush it, but I personally get a kick out of being an infant and also being an adult and finding humor in the sort of stupidity and the immaturity that he does have throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
But again, take that from this dude, me. That might not be for everybody, especially a lot of our wonderful left-leaning friends. I love them all.
Sure.
But there are things in here that will not just make them cringe, it will make them probably throw their remote control at the television.
Sure.
So I get it. But yeah, in terms of if this was on aging poorly, I would say it does not hold up.
Okay. It definitely doesn't hold up.
Doesn't hold up at all.
Well, you've already elucidated all the complicated reasons, so I'll skip that part and just say that I think I probably would tentatively recommend to watch it at least once.
Yeah.
For all the elements that I said that I really love, because take into account I'm a Leonard Six fan and a Hudson Hawk fan. And definitely there are going to be some, like a lot of older media, there's going to be some things that you look at and go, well, okay.
Yes.
Hopefully you won't be too offended by it. If you don't want to be offended at all, just skip it. You're not going to, it clearly had no cultural impact, so you're not going to miss anything.
No. I mean, I don't think there were, besides the comics, I don't think there was any kind of spin-off anything either, like in terms of merchandising so you're not going to find something and be
Although Rex Weiner, if that's his name, if that is really his name, has a blogspot site which tells you how he's doing.
And I don't think you can actually get any of the actual things he published in the New York Times or wherever or New Yorker. I don't remember where he
I read that they were collected.
Village Voice, maybe?
LA Weekly or something
LA Weekly.
That. Yeah.
I just couldn't. I was doing a search and I found one book you could get on Amazon which had nothing. It had to do with like the 60s.
Oh.
And it wasn't maybe it was in there, but it wasn't the Ford Fairlane adventure type stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I am fascinated. I mean, you can get these for pennies on the pound, the Ford Fairlane comics. So I'm totally getting them off like whatever, mycomics.com or whatever. I might go to Hot Comics or whatever and just see if they have them. But I'm like, I'm interested in pulling away the Andrew Dice Clay of it and being like, again, the concept for me as a sort of a rock geek is just very, very like, I'm just so in love with it, of the idea of this dude who kind of has a love-hate relationship with like the rock and roll scene, but he's doing it because this is how he fell into it. And
he's a frustrated artist in a way.
He is. He's not a great guitarist, but he owns the,
left-handed. Not a great detective.
He's not a great detective. But of the two, he's probably a better detective, which is horrible. But yeah, I'd be interested. I mean, I'd read that. I'm going to read the comics.
Sure.
It's going to be the art looks okay. Of course, it all looks like Dice, but I mean, it all looks, very 1990 DC.
Yeah.
Non-Vertigo DC.
How do you think this compares or doesn't to something like Deadpool?
Oh my God.
Which is meta, which is violent and funny, also potentially offensive. Because that thing has taken off and soared.
Yeah.
And except for clearly, there's less, revealing of the curtain in terms of what the character's sort of motivation is. Deadpool is misogynistic and he's offensive.
Yeah.
But you kind of get more that the joke is on him and it's on everybody.
Wow.
And if Ford Fairlane had got more into that territory, would it have worked more?
Oh man, that's great.
When I really sit down and try to think about it, I can't find too many differences between them. Ford actually he gets more tail than he gets as much tail as Deadpool wants to get.
Yeah,
if he could.
Oh, God, there's just such a Man, that's a great question. Although I think,
Sorry, I saved it to the end.
yeah, I'm glad this. Okay, let's retool the podcast.
Yeah,
it
we
needs
gotta
to be if this had been Deadpool. That's the name of the podcast. If
Sure.
this had been Deadpool,
Yes.
No, I think the comparisons are fantastic. Now that you put it in my brain, I also think there's a fun, fierce, almost femininity, which makes no sense, but I'll try to explain it, to Deadpool as a character. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid to be just, well, sort of a Bugs Bunny type, but also very like, I'm totally comfortable with being this sort of goofy weirdo who's not so macho. But I'm blowing holes in 12 faces right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's I mean, as we both know, and your listeners probably know too, it's like, Deadpool didn't start this way. He started, Liefeld was like, here's what he is. He's just this guy in a cool costume and blah, blah.
Well, he's a ripoff of Deathstroke. Is what
Yes.
Yeah.
And he turned, eventually there was a turnaround with good writers, like Posehn and all these fantastic, creative teams who turned it into this thing where it's like fourth wall breaking, anything's possible because he can't die. You blow the crap out of him. So I think there's something great about the fact that he is what, if you injected a little bit of that into Ford Fairlane, if you'd let him be a little bit more, not sensitive, that's not the right word, but if you'd positioned him, again, I think it comes back to, he shot himself in the foot with his act.
Yeah.
Whereas Deadpool had, when people who don't like comic books and see Deadpool and realize they like superhero movies and go, why can't all superhero movies be like this? I'm like, well, not all comics are like Deadpool, because Deadpool, that's the whole bit.
Yeah.
Spider-Man isn't going to do that. He can be wisecracking, but he's not going to be like literally tearing a page off his own comic and talking to you,
right?
And be horrifically violent, in like a Lobo sort of way or whatever.
Yeah.
But God, that's fascinating. That's tough to sort of quantify.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. It's the machismo. It's the character. You just can't get around that.
No. It's really hard. I think
and you lose half your audience already. You should lose the entire audience, but you just organically lose half of your audience.
Just marginalize what most of the 20th century did, which was like the buying power of African Americans, of Asian Americans, of women, of all these people. Mm-hmm. You have completely marginalized everything so that the dudes are getting everything. And it's getting its comeuppance. Look at where we're at now. Like, it's just, this is where we're at. And I love that you can have a movie like Deadpool, and it can appeal to, millions, no matter who they are. Going back to Suicide Squad, when I saw it in the movie theater, and I did see it in the movie theater, proudly, I almost saw it twice. I saw it in the movie theater, like the weirdo I was, this almost borderline perv. I was mostly in a movie theater filled with little girls dressed up like Harley.
Oh, okay, sure.
That movie did bang up box office because of little girls. Mm-hmm. And they don't care, because guess what? Harley is awesome. Yeah, she's got the Deadpool thing going for her now because it's too much. Stop.
Yeah, right.
I think it's great that she's got every book in the world and is constantly doing spinoffs, and she's the new character again.
Yeah.
But Jesus, that was a massive, if you'd had sort of a Harley Quinn character in Dice, which could have been Jazz, except, she
good
could
casting, Lauren Harley Quinn.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
So I think she could have been something where if they just built her up more and not just been like, I wish you'd pay attention to me more, Dice. Yeah. We used to have a thing. It's like, no, she could be a walking, talking badass.
Again, there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You're screaming at the beginning of the play. Stop doing it. Oh, hi,
that's
Hamlet.
my character. Oh, hi.
God.
Not yet. Someday.
Yes,
someday.
maybe someday. Maybe if Wiener does it, if he does it, if Wiener brings out a second Ford Fairlane,
oh man,
then maybe there's a potential for the franchise. But
with them rebooting everything, I feel like no IP is poisoned anymore.
No.
Well, maybe some, but they literally called the movie Birth of a Nation and tried to do
That's right.
another movie. So it's like, I just feel like you could do anything now.
On all levels.
Yeah.
You can do that everywhere. I mean, DC did the thing with Hanna-Barbera. They're doing Feature Quest. They're doing like I'm going to keep bringing back Suicide Squad. What am I doing? It's the Banana Split Suicide Squad one shot. It's like Banana Splits and Suicide Squad. I never would have guessed. And why is Flintstone selling so well? Why are all these Wacky Races comics? Everything old is new again.
Wacky Racers.
It's a good comic. Anyway, that's off topic, but yeah, I think anything is like resurrectable. That's not a word. But anything can be resurrected, and I don't put it past them. Like, in 10 years, this could be a property, and nobody who's alive, besides me in a wheelchair or on a respirator, or a do not resuscitate, tattoo on my arm.
Sure.
Nobody is going to remember the original, the source material.
Yeah.
Just like Deadpool. It's like all of us old farts remember the old comics, but
sure.
Anyway, wow, way off topic.
Well, everything's on topic,
down,
but yeah, that and Last Action Hero, and start cutting some lines. For Joel Silver, and let's get this machine going. Well, I think we've covered the entire thing.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us, listeners. If you want to let us know how you felt about this movie, you can tell us on Facebook at facebook.com/craftdisservices, and we're also on Twitter at craftdisservice. And we're on iTunes, and no, it's not even iTunes anymore. It's Apple Podcasts and Google Play, Stitcher. You can find us there. When you do, subscribe, rate, and review us, because it helps us out a lot, and we'd really appreciate it. Sam, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Facebook, Sam Landman, of course. I am also one half of Aging Poorly at agingpoorly.com. That's where all our stuff is housed. I think we're on Apple Podcasts. But also, if you want to maybe produce something I wrote, I have something called oneactaweek.tumblr.com, where I wrote 52 one-acts in 1 year. That's one act a week, if you're counting. But oneactaweek.tumblr.com. I'm also on Twitter as at droningonwe. I'm not going to spell it because who cares? But yeah, find me on Facebook. I'm, clearly on Instagram and all that kind of crap too. So it's all connected.
How often does Aging Poorly come out?
We're good to crank out maybe one a month. We're actually going to work on one and have our second guest on it. So we're going to hit a few interesting things. I think I'm doing a Yes album.
Oh, nice.
Our guest is probably doing, I think he's doing, I can't even remember. But yeah, there's a few things we got on the hopper, but mostly it's just like, churn. We just don't do it enough because
comes out when it's ready.
When it's ready, when it's fully,
when it's
or
done.
I want to say fully baked, but let's just say if it's burnt, it'll come out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. And the credits are rolling. So this is Aaron for Sam saying, keep it real.